Okay guys, as you can see here, we're going to go ahead and put this 530 completely back together, maybe take it for a drive today. We're going to start off with pulling the intake boot, putting the dipstick in, put a new oil ring on it, make sure it's seated good. Yesterday we just started this car just for a few seconds to make sure it's going to start, make sure nothing else is bad. I didn't hear this car run. I kind of want to make sure it didn't have a rod knocking before we went and put everything all back together on it. So basically, once we get the dipstick in, I already changed one of the pulleys. We're going to go ahead and put the belts on it. We'll go ahead and slide the radiator in. We'll go ahead and put the tank on. All that's very easy. The only thing that sucks about this is I got to put all the nuts on the exhaust manifold. And it's not very hard. It's a little time consuming. On the 3 Series, that's a pain in the ass, man. So it's not too bad on this. Let's go ahead and get started and see how it goes. Okay, a lot of you guys might laugh at this, but this is why I do these exhaust manifold nuts quite a bit. You got to start them by hand no matter what you do, right? You don't want to cross it anything. You at least get 3 or 4 turns in each one, and then you always want to torque them down with the ratchet. If you guys are real picky, use a torque wrench. But where this takes all the time is going through and actually torquing down, or not torquing down, but running all the nuts in. That could take you a lot of time. There's a lot of bolts. There's over, I believe, over 20 bolts to this, or nuts. So I like to use this. My little impact, because we're not going very tight. We basically just want to snug them up. And we'll use 2 of these universals, the impact universals. Obviously, if you had 2 3/8, it'd be a lot better. I got a 1/2 inch adapter and a 3/8 and a little extension. You can see the flex that has like a big U, so you could actually get in from up here and go down. You get to almost all of them on the 5 Series cars. On the 3 Series cars, you're not gonna be able to get to near as many of them. That'll save you guys a hell of a lot of time. Okay, so a few things when you're putting this stuff back together. Make sure all your oxygen sensor wires are tucked in back out of the way. And this guy had a rotten piece of rubber going from the vacuum line to right here to the secondary air valve. Where I'm going to go and replace that with a new piece of line. So like I said, it's not too big of a deal. It's very second. That could throw a code. We're going to want to just basically get the radiator in it, get the dipstick tube in it next, and get this thing started up and let it run a little bit and just see exactly where we stand. It did start before, but that doesn't mean that the motor is perfectly okay. Now, let me remind you, when I bought this car, it did not run. So the whole situation is unknown. Until we drive it on the highway, you just never know. It could have all kinds of problems. Okay, so this is where we're at, guys. On the dipstick tube, you want to clean out the hole in the oil pan like you just saw me do. On the X5 the other day, we had a little bit of a problem. So here's the factory ring come out of it, and it's nice and soft yet. It's pretty good shape. On the X5, that wasn't good enough. It still leaked. It still drips. So I got these other O-rings. They're a little bit smaller, a little bit skinnier. And what I end up doing on the other one is putting the little one where it goes in the oil pan first, and then the big one I stacked them. And when I did that, it worked really well. I think that'll be a little better option. For some of you guys, the inset on the oil pan is deep enough. You could probably put 3 or 4 oil rings on it if you had to. But I think running 2 of them will give you a little more insurance, and you're not going to have some kind of rupture or leak. Okay, so you see what I did? What I did, I took the 2x4 and this little bracket right here. You can see it or not. I just gently tapped it down. You're trying to make sure that the dipstick is seated down. If not, it's going to leak like all hell. You want to make sure your bolt lines up easily and goes in easily. If it's up too far or don't want to line up, that's one indication it's not down far enough. Now, most of you guys only have to use one O-ring. It's my preference to use two. It does take a little more carefulness to get that seated correctly, and some cars that may not work on. So we're going to do this point. We're going to go ahead and reassemble the throttle body boot, reassemble the DISA, get everything stacked back up. Then we're going to go to the front and we're going to put the belts and everything else on. Okay, so just a couple minutes, that's tightened back down. One thing to remember, I like to use this on this little impact, and this is a 1/4 inch socket. If you turn the clamps up on the throttle body boot, and on the M54, if you face them both up this way on the back side, you get to them both with long extension. It saves you a lot of time, a lot of hassle. You got to make sure that boot's good. You got to make sure that boot's all the way on the throttle body. If you tighten it down and it's not, it could rip the boot. You don't go real tight, that's not a real strong impact. None of this is going real tight. You saw me run the DISA valve screws in with that. I just went in just a snug. They're not crazy ignorant tight at all. That is just brass inserts in a plastic intake. They don't have to be tight. That has an O-ring. Just snug up and just a little more, and that's all you need. So we're done with that. We're gonna go ahead and put the radiator in, and we'll go ahead and put the belts on first, and then snap the lines and the tank on. So I want to note a couple things here. When putting the radiator in, there's a little holder right here, and there's a little holder right there. On the bottom of the radiator has these little rubber pieces. That snaps up on the radiator. This rubber sits on that little ledge. You have to have the rubber on both sides. If you don't, when you go to actually screw them in, I'm sorry, right here, it's going to be sitting too low, and it's not going to want to bolt upright. It's going to be a big ass mess. So make sure you have your rubber pieces. Make sure you always run your proper straps up here, the little plastic clips. If not, the radiator could fall forward and get into the fan, and hard telling what. Okay, so you saw me struggle with it. A lot of times what happens is the rubber boots, they get out of the holder. You got to reach down there and try to push them back. So once you get in there correctly, everything's going to be sitting level. So you can see right there, everything sits nice and flat on both sides, and you know you're good. So that's one thing to watch out for, guys. That's a real common mistake. I'll get these cars a lot. The radiator will be sitting down, or it'll be sticking up too high. Either way is just as bad. Everything's not going to lock in. If you do that, your radiator, your fan shroud is not going to sit in there right. Okay, and a lot of guys struggle with these belts a lot, but this is how they route. You have to put the main one on first. The AC goes on last. So it goes like this. It goes up and around this guy here, back around the crank, back through, up, and then it goes under this idler. Now obviously when these are, what makes it tricky is when this has no tension on it, when you're not prying down on it with the Torx, it's hitting this other pulley, you're very close to it. So you got to push down on it, and you got to have your ratchet in the right spot, or you're not going to get it on. It takes a little bit of practice. This bottom one, it goes like this. So the bottom of the belt goes on top of the idler pulley, or the tensioner pulley. Okay guys, so we're going to go ahead and put these radiator hoses on. And how we're going to do this, even though this is a brand new hose, you need to put a little bit of lubrication in it. We're going to take a little bit of WD-40, just a little mist of it. And you're going to make sure all these fittings are very clean. Take a rag and wipe it out. Make sure you're good. You're going to take a rag and wipe this. You're going to want to wipe the radiator. You got to make sure all this stuff's clean. That's where your drips are going to come from. So we're going to go ahead and leave the clips in it. And we're just going to push them on here and lock them in. And you should be able to hear it click when you lock in. like that. This one did click, you just couldn't hear it as much. We're gonna go ahead and repeat the same process on the bottom hose. Grab it real quick. Now these usually don't blow out. These top ones like to split right there. The bottom one we're gonna clean the same exact way. I'm just wiping the oil ring out with a rag. And like I said, just a little bit of mist. And same way up here, we're gonna just go ahead and wipe that off too. And it's the same way, guys. We're gonna go ahead and snap those on. Make sure your wire bail is down. So unlock that on and go ahead and do the same on the top. Just like that. That's how you put the radiator hoses on. That goes the same on the 99 and up cars for any of the little lines. The lines that go on the expansion tank here. This expansion tank is broken, so we're going to replace it. So we'll go ahead and I guess we'll do that next. Okay, sorry about that, guys. The camera went dead. So basically what we did here is just attach the two lines in the bottom, clean all the fittings. We attach the top with a hose clamp. Now we're not going to put this shroud back in there right now. We're going to wait. We're not going to put the fan or the shroud. We want to make sure nothing's leaking. We don't have any problems back in here. We want to make sure we don't have any bearing noise. Like I said, we did replace one, but not the other one, so it's hard to say. The manifold's done. I think we're pretty much ready to put water in it and start. We'll go ahead and check the oil. We're going to go ahead and change that. But we do want to make sure it has enough to at least run for a minute or two. Now we still can't run it real long until we put the fan on. I don't like putting the fan on at this stage because if your bottle falls down or something happens, it's just going to blow up. So we don't want to do that. Let's go ahead and get the fluids in it and see if it'll start. Okay, so you guys see what I did? I went ahead and reached in and turned the key on after I started filling it. Not started, just turn it on, turn the heat all the way up to 90, and then I filled it until it came out here, until there was no more air. Then I put the plug back in it, and over here I filled this until it did the same thing with the screw right there. Then I put the plug back in it, and now we're at the top. The secondary pump's running, you can see it. And we're right there at the top. So we're gonna go ahead and try to start it and see what we got here. Okay, so we're running. These motors always sound loud at first and they'll come out of it. Coolant's doing good. It's warping a little bit, some bubbles out there. It's gonna do that for a little bit. If you don't want it blowing over big time. You can see now it's starting to quiet down. And everything's doing good. Burned the WD-40 off the manifold. Of course, that's where we sprayed WD-40 on there, and this thing had oil over the place. So everything's quieting down, everything's sounding good, all the belts look good, and it looks like we're probably good to go. So basically you're just going to keep a close eye on it. You're going to want to look for drips. You're going to want to make sure nothing over here is catching on fire. Everything's doing good. Everything's away from the manifolds. We're going to go in here and we're going to look in the car. We're going to look at the gauge. It's kind of smoky in here. Without the cabin air filter boxes on, smoke's going to come through the vents. Everything looks good. We got check engine light. We know, I'm sure we got a problem. We got the traction control light, but no ABS light. So that means as soon as we take off, it'll probably reset. And I actually thought this car had 180,000 miles, but it has 152. That's always a good deal, I guess. And we got about a quarter tank of gas. So let's see what codes we got here. And by the whole time we're doing this, we're keeping a close watch on our temperature gauge there. These are all codes from before, so let's go ahead and erase them. Let's go back and recheck. Check engine lights off, activation solenoid valve, tank ventilation, and signal sensor radiator outlet coolant temp. Okay, we didn't plug that in the bottom of the bottle, but that's okay for right now. We'll let it run for a minute or two. We need to shut it off. We'll let it cool down, and we'll go ahead and check everything out. Looks like also the brake pad sensor's going off, but luckily I know somebody that could fix that. Alright guys, you can see she's smoking a little bit. We're going to have quite a bit of that probably after a blown head gasket. But that's all for today's video. Hopefully this helps some of you guys out doing this head gasket job or just general maintenance. I went through a lot of different things today. I guess if it doesn't snow tonight, tomorrow will be the test drive. We'll make sure all the wheel bearings are good and everything else is good to go. Thanks for watching, guys.